What is the message of this festival of lights? Once again, Jewish people are always plagued by villains. They come from Greece or Egypt or Syria or even Jerusalem itself. It doesn't really matter. The villains bring terrible harm and suffering, yet they are considered villains because, not just because they bring suffering, but because they seek to put out Hashem's light forever. That's really what makes them true villains.
Yes.
Because there's bad guys and then there's villains. Okay? There are guys who make wrong judgments, bad decisions, and really sort of take you in the wrong direction. And then there's people who are just wicked and evil all day long. Exactly. It's a different story. So, that's what makes villains villains. So here's the first one for you. You know this one. Antiochus Epiphanes. He was born in the year 215 BCE, and he became king of the Seleucid Empire in the year 175. So he was an extravagant ruler, known for very unpredictable and erratic behavior, by the way. His coins stated that he was deity manifest. How about that?
Deity manifest.
Yes, he actually thought this of himself. Now, I want you to realize he was not the first one. Some of his ancestors, actually, the kings of Seleucid Empire that came before him, they had no trouble of claiming deity as well. So he was known as Antiochus Epiphanes, which translates as Antiochus God Manifest.
God manifest.
That's what he was calling himself. Now, though secretly he was mocked as Antiochus Epiphanes, which translates as Antiochus the Madman. I mean, you change one letter. So look at this, like this. You see this mu right here, and then you change phi and mu, and all of a sudden it turns into a madman. I'm willing to bet a Jew came up with that one, but maybe a really educated, Greek-speaking Jew. So I don't know, just my theory. So that's Antiochus. Now we realize that he's a villain because of what he has done and the role that he plays in the Hanukkah, but there's so much to his character that people don't always know about, and little tiny facts of his life I find absolutely fascinating. Here's an interesting account. This is from a historian, a Roman historian. He writes in the History of Rome. His name is Granius Licinianus. And so in this book, he tells us a little bit about what Antiochus was really like. Antiochus, who was staying in Athens, became king after the death of his brother. If you know, the story really was that he wasn't supposed to become the king. His brother was supposed to become king, but he got it passed on to him. So afterwards, he considered waging war against the Romans. Yes, Antiochus was a little bit impulsive. He almost got into war with Rome. Hey, he's got a pretty sizable kingdom, but taking on Rome is serious business. Over what? Over an island. I think they fought over Cyprus. So he wanted it, and they wanted it too. But he backed down. But he's said to have been deterred by the death of Perseus. So that's his friend. Antiochus had a few good traits mixed in with many bad ones. This is pretty bad when a historian says that about you. He had an unpredictable nature and was extremely frivolous. He used to join in revels at banquets, basically like crazy orgies, and he danced naked to the music. He bathed in public, which for royalty was kind of no. You don't bathe in public. Like, you can afford your own bathroom. Why would you go to a public one? So he bathed in public and went to the bath, anointed with myrrh and drenched with perfumes, meaning he ruined it for everybody. You don't put perfumes and oil on yourself till after you take a bath. But he did it before. He took a bath in perfume, then he decided to go to the bathhouse and impress everybody how good smelling he was, I guess. Eventually, but it's oil. So, you get the idea. Antiochus is a real party animal, let's put it that way. Very unpredictable, very impulsive. The story goes on. He led a procession on Austrian pony, and at Hierapolis, he pretended to marry Diana. Diana is Greek goddess of fertility. Diana is a Roman, her Roman name, and so her Greek name you would know as Aphrodite. So he pretended to marry Aphrodite. And while the others prepared a banquet, because he's a royal, people are going to play along. If he wants to marry a goddess, they have to play along. While others prepared a banquet, he removed the vessels from the temple, and after dining off the tables, he took away the vessels as a dowry, except for one ring, which was the only thing he left of all the offerings to the goddess. So he basically cleaned out the temple of goddess Diana, ate all the food, and took all the offerings with him, leaving her a ring because, well, of course, they were married. Yes, he does. You're seeing a pattern now here. Now you have to understand, the reason why I'm telling you the story, because this will help you understand why he did what he did in Jerusalem. So, when Gracchus, whom I mentioned previously, was the consul of the second time, Antiochus died of terror one night. So kind of a mysterious death. We don't really know why, but so the historian tells us that he just basically had a bad dream and died. While his body was being carried back to Antioch, the animal suddenly took fright, and his body was tossed into the river and disappeared. It was the penalty that he paid for his fragrant sacrilege. Antiochus dedicated 2 colossal statues, 12 cubits high, one to Olympian Jupiter and other to Capitoline Jupiter. At Athens, he built the Olympion, with marble walls, and he surrounded it with numerous columns. The famous temple of the Olympian Jupiter at Athens had long remained unfinished. So he died before he could finish building some temples. Yeah.
Fair to assume that when they say things like that, like he died of terror one night and then animals were frightened and they lost the body, that he was killed and they got rid of him.
Perhaps. Most emperors and kings and rulers did not go peacefully in the middle of the night. So he might have been poisoned, which is why he died in his sleep. Or something like he went to sleep and never woke up. We really don't know a lot of times what happened. People suspect a lot of times with royal families that this type of foul play is happening because people want to be the king. That somebody needs to dispose of him before they can take over. And so, but he had plenty of enemies. But the story is interesting that they say, well, the reason why this happened to him because of his sacrilege, meaning like he plunders temples of Diana and things like that. So he's just not a great guy, even according to the Greek and Roman way of understanding propriety. He's not exactly an upstanding guy. So this is from a Roman historian. As you could see, they're not being very kind to Antiochus. So if we kind of place him in the category of villains, it explains why. And you see, he already has a nasty habit of robbing temples. So this is not new. He's done this in different places. And he also builds. He likes to build things, a lot of times to himself and to his god. So Jupiter, that he worshipped, that's like his patron deity is Jupiter. And so specifically Jupiter Capitolinus is like his family god, basically. He wanted to build statues to him everywhere to increase the honor to his family god. Yes. Yes, that's another name for Zeus. Yes. So that's the kind of guy that he is, and that's why we consider him definitely a villain. So, a couple more things that you need to understand about Antiochus. Antiochus IV, or Antiochus Epiphanes, victoriously finished the series of 6 Syrian wars between his ancestors, the Seleucids, and the Ptolemies in Egypt. This is where the Hanukkah story really comes in. What you don't realize is we got trapped in the middle of a war. That wasn't even ours. The wars were over the territory of Syria. So there's one little piece of land that they both wanted, and they fought for it. And it began by Antiochus I, 75 years before Antiochus IV was even born. So this is an old war. There's a whole series of wars that they're fighting. And Antiochus IV gets to finish it. There's a decisive victory, basically. The only way to win in a war is to wipe out the other guy completely. Or somehow make them not able to fight back again. And that's exactly what he has achieved. So what happens is Judea and Jerusalem are basically caught in between this struggle in the year 168 BCE. That's what we call the Maccabee Wars. So that's when it happened. But the wars of the Maccabees are really squabbles for Antiochus. They're little small regional conflicts of a much bigger war that him and his family has been fighting for a long time. Now, I want you to realize how embarrassed this guy might have been, because when Maccabees won, this guy has been fighting wars his entire life. His entire family has been built on wars. He comes from a hereditary family of famous generals, great generals.
Both sides descended from Alexander, or not descended from him, but they divided his territories
Right.
up. Yeah.
So these people are well-known commanders, military. I mean, it's like they all went to West Point and graduated with honors, and some Jews with sickles and hammers, beat them up or something like that. It's like priests who don't really know much about war. So it's embarrassing, for sure. Which is why he reacted the way he did, by the way. You have to understand. You don't embarrass people like that. So this is the story. This is where Hanukkah comes in. These Syrian wars that have been fought for generations now, they get caught in the middle. Why? Because if you know where Egypt is, and you understand the territory that he rules, which would have been Asia Minor and Persia, is what he had. Well, to get to Egypt, you have to go to Israel. You have to pass through. And so we just happened to be on the way. And every time the armies went one direction or the other direction, they had to pass through Israel. And that's how this whole battle got started. That's how that's how Jews get basically entangled with these guys. Because prior to that, things were fairly peaceful for the most part. Israel was left alone. So here's another story from Josephus. This is, again, Antiquities, another chapter. It says, "And it came to pass after 2 years, in the 105th year of the 25th day of the month, which was called Kislev." This is, of course, Josephus writing, so he tells you what the Jewish month is. "And by the Macedonians Apileus, the 153rd Olympiad." So he gives them good references to their time counting. It says that the king came up to Jerusalem. So the king that he talks about is Antiochus IV. Okay, this is what now we're getting to the Hanukkah story. "And pretending peace, he got possession of the city by treachery." So he didn't come as a conqueror. He just came as a friend. But he's marching with his entire military. He's on a military campaign. He just says, "Don't worry, I'm not here to conquer you. This is all these weapons are reserved for the other guys. Don't worry." So he comes and he takes possession of the city by treachery. At which time he spared not so much as those that admitted him into it. So basically the people that opened the door and welcomed him in are the ones he killed first. And on the account of the riches that lay in the temple, but led by his covetous inclination. And this is, of course, Josephus' estate, but you get the idea. This is actually historically accurate, because we already know this about Antiochus from other sources. He says, "For he saw there was in it," in the temple, "a great deal of gold, and many ornaments that had been dedicated to it of very great value. And in order to plunder its wealth, he ventured to break the league he had made." What I want you to realize is the reason why he entered the city as in its non-threatening way. People welcomed him. They opened the gates. Is because they weren't expecting him to attack. They weren't expecting him to rob the temple. He was coming as a king who rules this domain. This is essentially his land, and these are his vassals, his servants. Israel at that point is under his jurisdiction. They pay him taxes. They pay him tributes all the time. And they have an agreement. We don't fight in wars against you. You don't destroy us. And we just keep paying taxes. And you just be rich and happy and healthy and do whatever you want to do. So they had an arrangement that when he sees the riches of the temple, he decides to break. So they had a good arrangement. He had tax revenue coming in. It's like he had this income flowing to him all the time. he decided to break that because he saw the riches of the temple. So here's that, personality who likes to rob temples. There you go. That's what happened. He saw they had too much gold, too many ornaments, too many fancy shiny things that he needed to have. Now, why did he need all that? Well, you have to realize how big his empire was. And you need to finance it, and wars are very, very expensive. So in order to fight wars, you have to hire soldiers, you have to pay them, you have to feed them, you have to do all these different things, and sometimes even you have to pay their retirement plans and things like that. This is a very expensive enterprise. So Josephus tells us what happened. He came to Jerusalem as a friend, and by treachery took the city and slaughtered the people and took all the gold and took all the good things out of the temple, because he was actually intending to plunder its wealth all along. It was just an easy way to get in.